But if you think the fire ended anything, then you've never seen what happens when a ghost starts haunting the wrong people, because Anne Heche didn't go quietly into the afterlife. They made sure of that. But what they failed to do was bury the weight of everything she had already said, everything she hinted at, everything she knew, and now, as lawsuits multiply around Diddy and Ellen disappears from the public stage like a vanishing act gone stale, Anne's voice has only grown louder, echoing through TikToks, podcasts, archived interviews, and blood-stained Hollywood timelines like a curse that refuses to be forgotten. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's why Anne became so dangerous, because she couldn't forget. Because forgetting would have meant survival, but silence was never in her nature, not when she'd already clawed her way out of the psychological abyss of a childhood soaked in trauma, where secrets festered behind every smile, and where Anne, just a child, was forced to survive horrors most adults can't even comprehend. Because long before she walked red carpets or kissed Ellen on the cover of The Advocate, she was the little girl in a house where the father, a closeted, double-life pastor, sexually abused her for years while pretending to preach salvation, and when she finally said it out loud, people turned away, again, just like they would when she went public with Ellen, and again when she accused Ellen of control, sabotage, and betrayal, and again when she tried to tell us about the Hollywood machine that eats women alive if they stop being useful. But Anne refused to stay useful, refused to be palatable, and that's what made her dangerous. Because it wasn't just about Ellen or even Diddy. It was about all of them. All the producers, executives, gatekeepers, and PR warlords who knew how to spin a scandal into sympathy and a corpse into a distraction. And when Anne crashed that car on August 5th, 2022, the headlines came fast and neat. Troubled star, tragic accident, another fallen woman who couldn't get clean. But those who knew Anne, who really followed her, understood there was nothing neat about her death, and certainly nothing accidental about the firestorm that followed, because Anne had spent her final months recording, writing, connecting, telling her story without filters or handlers, and what she said, between the jokes, the tears, the laughter, was a roadmap, a pattern of abuse, silencing, retribution, and finally a reckoning that no one was ready for, because Hollywood only forgives when you stay pretty, stay quiet, or die in ways that make good biopics, and Anne did none of that. She bled publicly, she spiraled in front of us, she dragged Ellen's name when no one else dared to, calling her greedy, manipulative, and obsessed with power, revealing that Ellen didn't want Anne to wear sexy dresses, didn't want her to smile too big, didn't want her to have friends or autonomy, just wanted her to serve as a prop for the queer love story Ellen was selling, one that would make her palatable to middle America and package her brand for white suburban moms. And when Anne didn't fit that mold, Ellen cut the strings, and the studios followed suit. Because by 2001, Anne wasn't just unemployed. She was radioactive, too queer, too chaotic, too real, and they called it mental illness, dismissed it as erratic behavior. But what if it was resistance? What if every messy public moment, every crazy quote, every tear-streaked interview was Anne trying to claw her way out of a narrative she never agreed to? And now we're left asking, what was Anne trying to reveal before the car crash that silenced her for good? Was it her experience with trafficking as a child? Was it the connections between major entertainment moguls and shadowy financial backers who fund recovery centers that allegedly double as silencing institutions? Was it Ellen's alleged involvement in these circles, or Diddy's? Because the pattern is undeniable. Powerful men and women protected by media machines, former associates ending up dead, lawsuits vanishing into sealed settlements, and then there's Anne, who had nothing left to lose, who wasn't protecting an image anymore, who wasn't angling for a comeback, but was simply telling the truth, raw and unpolished, and they couldn't have that. Not when she was working on a film that touched on trafficking. Not when she was dropping names in off-record conversations. Not when she was talking about the things everyone else pretended didn't exist. And so when that Mini Cooper barreled into a house and burst into flames, we were told it was another tragic Hollywood flameout. But what if it was a hit? What if it was staged? What if the person driving that car wasn't trying to die, but trying to escape? Because let's not forget, Anne hit another property first, left the scene, then accelerated toward the second house at a speed that didn't match the behavior of someone intoxicated. She was once the dazzling comet that streaked across Hollywood's most hallowed skies, a firebrand of talent, vulnerability, and relentless audacity. But by the time the world blinked, that comet had been extinguished in a violent explosion that left more smoke than answers and more silence than truth. Because Anne Heche didn't just die, she vanished in a blaze that some say was accidental, others say was inevitable, and still more believe was orchestrated, buried beneath the glitz, the red carpets, and the uncomfortable whispers that have stalked her since the day she stepped into a taboo-breaking relationship with one of the most powerful women in television. Ellen DeGeneres wasn't just her lover, she was her undoing, her gatekeeper, her silent executioner, according to the new wave of eerie revelations, podcast confessions, resurfaced footage, and freshly unearthed documents that piece together the slow-motion collapse of a woman who dared to speak out, dared to wear what she wanted, dared to be visible when it was dangerous to do so, dared to tell Ellen she needed friends only to be told that girlfriends who need people weren't welcome in the cold marble palace that was Ellen's carefully curated life of smiles, sponsors, and secrets. And when Anne finally walked away from the relationship that should have lifted her up but instead held her hostage, she thought she was free. But freedom in Hollywood comes at a cost, and Anne was about to learn what it meant to be truly, savagely, and permanently cancelled in an industry where silence is loyalty and the price for speaking out is exile. Because even before the flames swallowed her car and her body in August 2022, Anne was already burning, already being erased from sets, from studios, from press circuits, already feeling the invisible hands closing around her voice and pushing her into the margins of an industry she once dominated. Because she wasn't just a rising star, she was the next big thing, the golden girl of '97, a rom-com darling with Harrison Ford, a psycho siren in Gus Van Sant's controversial remake, and yet one red carpet, one moment of authenticity with Ellen by her side at the Volcano premiere, hand in hand, smiling for the cameras, turned her career into ashes before the flames ever touched her. Because the truth is, the industry wasn't ready for them, for her, for the audacity of queer love in public. And Anne knew it. She said it herself in 2020. That night changed everything, and changed it did, because instead of applause, she got fired from a $10 million deal, blacklisted from studio films for over a decade, and while Ellen went on to rebuild, rebrand, and re-emerge as America's dancing sweetheart, Anne was left to wander in the wreckage, to spiral, to survive on the fringes, and when the world wasn't watching, when she thought it was safe to speak again, she finally told the truth, not just once, but again and again, in interviews, in TikToks, in her raw and messy 2001 memoir. But if you thought Anne Heche's story ended in flames and fading headlines, think again, because the deeper you dig into the charred wreckage of that crash, the more you begin to realize that Anne's death wasn't just the end of a personal tragedy, it was the unraveling of something far more sinister. A quiet reckoning echoing through the walls of Hollywood's most protected inner circles. Because when whispers become patterns and patterns reveal names, suddenly you're not just mourning a lost actress. You're peeling back the gold-plated mask of an industry where image is everything and truth is the enemy. And at the center of this smoke-choked conspiracy stands not just Ellen DeGeneres, but a man whose name looms like a thundercloud over every unspeakable allegation whispered in studio lots and behind velvet ropes. Sean Diddy Combs, the mogul who built an empire out of bravado and champagne, now facing a tsunami of lawsuits, rumors, and devastating questions about the people he protected, the women he discarded, and the secrets he might have kept. And while Diddy's downfall has erupted into tabloid chaos in its own right, armed raids, federal probes, women stepping forward with tales of abuse and coercion, what's been overlooked is how this connects to Anne, to Ellen, to the carefully controlled media machine that not only elevated them, but devoured them the moment they stopped playing along. Because according to one of Anne's podcast interviews just months before her death, she hinted cryptically at powerful friends in places they don't belong, and talked about a blueprint of silence that had been hanging over her for decades. And while fans chalked it up to another unfiltered rant from a woman long mislabeled as unstable, others are now revisiting those words with the gravity they deserve, because Anne wasn't crazy, she was cracked open. And from that brokenness came a clarity that terrified the people who had something to lose if she kept talking. And now, as the do